The
Like send
vegan.
me. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, it's good too. Even you can do it.
yeah. Like before, I was eating like that Beyond Meat stuff when I was
Yeah.
with, you know. So
You said you was ripped.
no, when I was with, because he was vegan. So
No, and I eat the Beyond Meat, but I like the Impossible with better.
oh, okay.
We are.
It tastes like chicken.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was bad.
mental health is necessary. For educated queens taking the lead, hold their hands and they'll help you succeed. Lay your head back, relax, just like that. Now listen to learn, and your problems will burn.
I knew she was gonna do it.
Why are you all like that?
Hey, ladies, how y'all doing tonight?
Now we got somebody
Irish.
watching on IG already. Okay, IG.
We at the cookout.
Right.
Speaking of the cookout, are y'all ready for the big cookout in July? I'm so excited.
Yes.
And we are.
I'm so excited for y'all to come to Ohio. I get to see y'all. I'll get to kind of come to my kind of stomping grounds. It's not really my stomping grounds, but kind
It's definitely your stomping grounds. Okay.
Yes, yes. So everybody, we are
of. Yep.
having a real clinical cookout, a real one in real life. You will get to see the aunties present in our areas, our specialty areas. And then we're
Yeah.
also going to have a big ass cookout, lots of food, everything. July 13th. And y'all be on the lookout for the registration link coming soon because we excited and we ready.
Be on the lookout for the cookout.
Yeah.
Hey. Hey.
Hi.
Hey, Makia. Isn't my girl Makia from TikTok? I wonder if that's her. Hey, girl.
So yeah, we've been I can't
Kier
wait.
said who? Kier said who cooking?
Child, not me. Not
Okay,
me.
now I wonder. It seemed like the comments from IG don't pop up on here because I'm looking at IG at the same time. I have to keep it up,
Oh.
Oh, okay.
so I have to read them from IG if we get some.
Can I start off with something?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how like we did our episode about weaponizing clinical terms and stuff like that, and I think this is. I'm so glad we did that episode because something happened 2 hours ago to me, right before I got on, and I had to check somebody. Okay, and typically I don't engage in this type of discourse, but what you won't do is play in my face. That's what you won't do. Because I'll run circles around you when it comes to racism and it intersect with the gun laws. And they thought they was gonna get me. But I'm here to tell you I'm LeBron in the fourth quarter when it comes to this type of stuff. Okay? I'm the clutch player here. And I just want to talk about like how like so much is happening and people just assume that they're smarter than the people that know that got the education and got the expertise. Like people are literally going around because that Baltimore stuff happened with the bridge being hit, and that's been all over the news and people have been talking about it. And there are literally people saying who have no engineering degree arguing with engineers. What? Like y'all hear one thing and just run with it. What is y'all doing?
It's fascinating. I think I saw you post that on your Twitter, Auntie Keisha. I was like, yeah, it gets frustrating when you see people do that. It's like the
Sure.
professionals trying to tell y'all, and y'all think y'all know more than the professionals.
And even if we don't know, our answer is probably gonna be a little bit closer to the real answer, than your answer.
Especially in something like that, like engineering. Do you know how long you got to go to school for engineering? Come on now. Like certain fields, I'm like, okay, yes, life experience can help out a lot. Like I'm never scared to say in the mental health field, yeah, like if we're not talking just diagnostic clinical stuff, yeah, it's people who might know some things because life experience is a big factor in your mental health. But engineering, sit down.
And I get it because I mean, yes, Amber talked about how people try to express their life experiences and they may not have the verbiage to do so. So they're using the terms that they hear from like the internet and stuff like that. And I get that. That's different. But to actually be arguing up and down with somebody and you're not even close to even what we're even talking about here. Like you don't know the you know how we know differential diagnosis. So of course we would know different symptomologies that can overlap with other disorders. We know that because we have the We have the clinical training to know that. But like you're not gonna know that if you don't study it.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just been this person it ain't getting on my skin, but they tried to play victim once I checked them on it. And I'm like, nah, you came here. You wanted LeBron in the fourth quarter, you're gonna get it.
So also too, people love to say, well, they'll argue with you about what's in your field, and then they'll be like, but my friend is in the same field as you, and she said this. And it's kind of like, okay, there's still a 50-50 chance. That drives me because I'm just like, you went, did some confirmation bias and made yourself right based on your friend that has to know more than me because she's your friend and she's been in the field a little bit longer. So you say, as if that can never ever be an issue either.
Right.
I just want people to do their homework. If you're gonna talk about something, which I told old dude, I was like, if you'd have just looked at my page and if you'd have just scrolled through the comments, you would have gotten your answer. Instead, you came here and became a victim when I told you about yourself.
Right.
I had a similar situation on a recent feedback call for an evaluation. When you come for an evaluation, you're looking for a diagnosis, typically, because that's why you're there. But I had, it was actually an adult client, and then sometimes their parents want to be on there. And the parent was telling me that I was wrong for trying to put the client in a box in terms of like a diagnosis. And I needed to put a specific term on the diagnosis. I don't know if I want to give too much detail, but basically like I went on Google and this is what I found on Google. And this is what my friend said. And I've been, with so-and-so for this long. And this is what you need to put on the diagnosis. I'm like, ma'am, you went on Google? Okay.
You know what?
For like 15 years. And you went on Google. Okay.
Just said I owe all my knowledge to Dr. Google.
It does irritate me because I'm like, if you don't believe in it, or if I'm not saying you always have to agree with me. I have parents that disagree and we can talk that through. But if you're going to like straight up tell me this is what I need you to do, this is what you need to do because you're wrong, because Google said something else, I'm like, get out of my face. Like I can't. Respectfully and professionally, this is going to be the diagnosis. And if you don't agree with it, you can go get a second opinion. Have a nice day.
I agree.
So, I had a parent come in recently, and I think that people have a hard time just being a little bit more humble because she was upset that her evaluation and everything was coming back and it was taking too long, just because we're swamped really. And so she said, "Give me the paper, and I'm going to take it for a second opinion, and I'm going to interpret the results." And I was like, "Are you a professional?" So I'm like, if you're not a professional, I can't even in good faith let you have these results and then go interpret them on your own. That's not even something that I'm even allowed or should be doing.
Right.
So, yeah, I think they it's frustrating to get a diagnosis, even though you want a diagnosis. I think a lot of times people want to come and find out that nothing's wrong. And I don't say what's wrong. I always say what's different, because wrong just sounds wrong.
I set my people up right in the beginning. I said, listen, whatever you came in here, what you thought, wipe that right away. Because what we think is going to take us this way, the results can take us a different way. So I want to make sure that you have an open mind about what's the results that may be coming out. So I already try to prep them before we even get there. I mean, not that it's always worked, but I at least try to steer them in some direction to be open.
So you just made me think about the book I'm reading. I really am into the decolonizing therapy book, and she, in the introduction, she talked a lot about how we pathologize a lot of things and how the mental and medical health complex has made just being human this pathology, and it takes away from actual healing, like the terms we use. Even saying this is your diagnosis, this is what's wrong with you is a problem. So you saying it's different, it's not what's wrong with you. That's kind of dope.
Yeah, it's very existential.
I try to explain it too in terms of like it's not something that's wrong with you, because so let's talk about anxiety and depression, for instance. Every person in this world experiences anxiety or nervousness at some point in their life. Every person feels sad. Every person may have moments where they feel depressed. Like everybody feels those emotions. But when we say diagnosis, it just means that it's like amplified for you. And it's starting to impact you in other ways to where you can't go to work because you're so anxious, or you can't go meet a new friend or go to a social function. So it's not that anything's wrong with you. We all experience it. It's just amplified for you because of your past experiences.
Right, right. And what makes us, or what separates us for the audience when it comes to understanding like the psychology, the clinical psychology part of it, we are expected to know like the research behind these disorders, like when it involves genetics, when it involves having to take medication, when it involves, who it may affect more, maybe man or woman, or a male child or a female child. Like we're expected to know those things. So it isn't just us giving you a diagnosis, it's us also following up with that research that coincides with that disorder. So there's a lot more that goes into it than us just diagnosing you. Like we look into other things, your family history, all that stuff, medical history, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I know we had this episode coming up about the weaponizing terms, but just like starting to do what I do, I'm starting to see a lot of conflict like between people, and then now they're starting to use those big terms like that person did me wrong, so they're a narcissist. This person is crazy. This person is they're I mean they're hurting me, and like I don't know, it's just ever since we did that weaponizing terms, it's been grating on me more and more and more. Ever since the other day.
Yes, and just so y'all know, that episode is coming out next week. And we talked about all these terms, how people use narcissism, how people use the term trauma. Like we talked about all of that. So y'all tune in next Wednesday at this same time to see that episode, because we did dive into that pretty deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
While y'all on here, welcome to the cookout. Like it's quite a few of y'all watching now. You could say hi. Like it's the cookout. You know you can't walk in black people's house and not speak. What's wrong with y'all?
Not treating them like.
Also, ask questions, y'all. Give us something to talk about. Ask some questions, mental health questions, anything.
Yeah.
Anything you want to know? Any questions y'all have?
We're trying to tell
thank you, Jessica.
Tell what?
Tell Abe to act right. We totally ignored his little comment that he threw in there earlier because he being.
Well, I don't know what he means. What about gun laws?
Well, because I was talking about that person trying to come for me. It wasn't necessarily anything about. Well, it was about gun laws. It's an old video that I did a year ago, which is I don't know why people are still watching that video on TikTok, but anyway, they are, and people are having a hard time speaking. I know it's a sensitive subject for people, and I'm fully okay with someone who disagrees if they want to protect themselves. You're absolutely okay to do that. I choose not to do that. But what you're not going to do is get on here and accuse me of being racist because I spoke about gun laws, and how it intersects with race. Now, all that person had to do was go back and look at my pinned videos on my TikTok. They would have had known my explanation. But instead, they wanted to accuse me of something instead of engaging in intellectual discourse. And one thing you won't do is engage with me like a fool. I thought of you, Shug. I was like, this is just foolish. I said, because one thing you're going to know about me is I'm going to do my homework and I'll run circles around you when it comes to this topic. And he tried to backtrack and say, oh, well, you didn't let me discuss. You just told me to get off your page. I said, no, you accused me of something. And I let you further know this wasn't an intellectual discourse. Mm-hmm. And you should have done your homework, but you chose not to. So
no, that's why Abe said, "What about gun laws?" I think he was trying to figure out what was happening. Like he came on at the part.
The dude was just talking out the side of his neck and didn't do his homework. But I politely gathered him right on up, because one thing you ain't gonna do is be no clown without me being a circus.
Ooh, I'm gonna bring all the circus.
I'm just saying.
I love it. I was like I don't know. First of all, I like my guns, okay? But I am also in one of those toting states, But I do know that big ego with low self-esteem and the right amount of impulsivity is not good for somebody with a gun. So stupid people with guns hurt people. Um oh, that's a good question.
Ooh, well, all right. I was gonna say y'all can ask questions, and if it's something like too personal or you just don't know, DM it. I'll check the DM. Just tell me you put it in the DM.
Who's taking that?
What's the difference between narcissist and borderline? You know what, Auntie Shook, what is borderline?
I'm ready.
Borderline.
Yes, borderline personality disorder is I can give you some of the symptoms of borderline personality disorder. So, a borderline person, they have their etiology, like the origins of their illness, of their mental illness is based in trauma. So, a borderline person might fear abandonment. They might have trouble with interpersonal relationships. You ever met somebody who can't get along with anybody? Who every time there's a problem, it was always the other person and it wasn't them. But then whenever even there was a small problem, the small problem got to be a big, big, big. Those are kind of some borderline traits. Um, it's me, Sagittarius. Okay, those are kind of some borderline traits. So a lot of times, borderline they'll fear abandonment. Somebody who got abandoned early, they might have like thoughts kind of like nobody loves me, nobody likes me, and they begin to bring all of that into their relationships, and they begin to be the clown in the circus in the relationships. So those are some borderline traits. But borderline personality is really it's a high level of pathology. It just keeps happening over and over and over, and they might not see themselves. And then there's like an intense amount of anger that might come with that person, even though they don't recognize it as that. There might be big blow ups. So that's borderline. Narcissism is a whole different deal. Who's taking narcissism? Or who has more to say about borderline?
Borderlines typically are suicidal, dialectical. They have that split thinking, or what do they call it?
They call it splitting, where
Splitting.
1 minute somebody is amazing to them and they're the best thing since sliced bread, and the next thing you know, they have harmed their children. They've never been that good of a person. They've been molesting them or beating them for years, and they, you know what I mean? Like you're either the best thing since sliced bread, or you are nothing, and you've never been nothing to anybody. And it might manifest itself in that relationship. They might act that out in that relationship, just like an actor on the stage.
Yeah, and you'll know if you're around the borderline. You absolutely will know, because they will have you thinking. They always tell us that if you feel like you crazy, it's not you. The borderline will have you thinking that you crazy, and it ain't even you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A person with borderline personality. Sorry.
And then narcissistic, when we see, here's the thing with saying narcissistic. Like, you notice how even in your question you put borderline personality. I mean, you probably meant it both, narcissist and borderline. These are both personality disorders. So that's what a lot of people don't recognize. Narcissist is a personality disorder. Narcissist personality disorder is a disorder, but then somebody can just be like a little narcissistic or have narcissistic traits. That word in and of itself describes certain traits, right? So with NPD specifically, we are talking about the primary symptom or sign is this grandiose sense of self. Like, this person think they the best thing on this earth. Can't nobody tell them different, but nothing actually proves that. Like, they are this I'm this grand person, but I've done nothing to actually show that I'm this grand person. I just think that I'm this grand person. And just like any other personality disorder, this is speaking to the very nature of the person, which is why you will often hear personality disorders can't be cured, because it's innate. It's just who you believe yourself to be. So with narcissistic, that grandiose sense of self is usually the main differentiator between that and other personality disorders.
Yeah, and then a lot of things are.
They lack empathy. And they lack empathy.
Yeah.
Not like they hurt your feelings, you know, right? Because some of us are like, I'll hurt their feelings. I don't give a damn. You know what I mean? Like, I needed to say what was said. This is somebody that continuously hurts you, continuously hurts other people. It's not only in a romantic relationship where this man hurt your feelings Now he's a narcissist. It's in every relationship that this person has. Everybody else might wonder if there's something wrong with them, but they might see they might see these traits in this person. This person might step on other people to get exactly what they want, not with no empathy. Or get some get back because they feel like they've been hurt. And like you said, like she said, grandiosity. Who are you to do this to me? Like an inflated sense of self. This is very severe. It's not like, oh, I can say, yup, 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 yup. And then a lot of times when you see all these traits in narcissistic people, if you go to DSM-5, there's a million other things that it could be before you diagnose this person as a narcissist.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you said it's not just romantic relationships because I swear that's the only time we hear it. When we on social media, I dated a narcissist or I was married to a narcissist. Yeah, but were they a narcissist to their kids too and their coworkers and their like this is across the board. Like Auntie Shiv said, it's not just when they date. I really want people to get into their heads. A person can be a horrible partner and a great friend, a great parent, a great child. They can be great in other roles. So if they're just a horrible partner, they don't have narcissistic personality disorder. It was just with you or with anybody else they might have dated.
And when you talk about grandiosity, we're talking about like over the top shit. Like people think that they like literally are going to be like the CEO of like a marketing company that they made up. They're going to think of some outrageous stuff sometimes. And it's not going to make sense because it's so far, sometimes it's so far removed. You'll be like, what? So some of this stuff can be just dramatic.
There's a follow-up question. Can a narcissist have, I'm assuming, borderline personality disorder? You can be diagnosed with multiple personality disorders, but for those specific ones, for me, I would have to reference the DSM to see, because sometimes it tells you which ones can and cannot be diagnosed together. So I'll have an answer for you in a few minutes. I'm going to check that out. But while I'm looking at that, we have another question from Abe. Without using names or locations, can you recall a situation when you helped a client or a patient and saw growth in them?
Are you talking about a borderline patient, Abe?
Or just in general?
I think he's talking just in general.
I will talk since we were the borderline personality. Since we are talking about that, I have helped a borderline personality, a person with borderline. So typically, one thing that you will see is when you tell somebody that they have borderline personality disorder, they get mad. They are mad because that's what they do, right? There is dysregulation most times. So they don't accept that. Who are you to tell me something like that about me? And I'm not crazy. That's the first thing that people think. So I have told somebody, you know what? And I had to do it in order to move the ball forward in therapy. Like, because sometimes, you give people a little bit of a push. I have said, you sound really borderline. Now let's go through the criteria of borderline personality disorder. We've been dealing with this for quite a while. And this, I feel, is very close to you. And she did not accept it. It was like, I don't know who you think you're talking to. I'm not coming back here. I don't know. But then everybody loves Dr. Google and everybody loves a diagnosis. So then, going down that borderline hole and, oh my God, you were a few minutes late. You hate me. You never wanted me in therapy anyway. You know what? I think I should leave. I shouldn't even really be here anyway. I don't think that you really want to be my therapist. We went through all these motions and over time. So what I did was start calling out the behaviors. And if I give you the diagnosis and all the criteria, I'm getting you to look at it each and every time you're doing it. And so just a lot of psychoeducation around it, like constantly, okay, calling out the cognitive distortion. What do you recognize that? Do you recognize that? And it took some years, and I do see progress, and it's not as pronounced. It's still there because it ain't going nowhere, but it's not as pronounced as it was, and it's a little bit more bearable. And actually, I've gotten thank yous from family and friends that was like, Lord, y'all know what we've been going through.
Yeah.
And before we continue, let me just answer that previous question. You can be diagnosed with multiple personality disorders, including borderline and narcissism. So it does say that borderline, histrionic, antisocial, and paranoid personality disorders may often be associated with narcissistic personality disorder. So they can be comorbid, just to answer the question.
And we had an episode on that last season. We talked about all the personality, all the cluster B personality disorders. So that's all the ones Auntie Amber just named. So you could actually learn even more about each of those if you go back and watch that episode.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead with the rest of the.
Hey, Jocelyn, I want to make sure we say hey to people that's saying hey and jumping on. Hey, Jocelyn. That's Jocelyn we went to school with, Shug. Is she frozen?
And Christina. Hey, Christina.
She froze.
All right. So, does anybody else have a situation to share where they saw growth in a patient?
I think that when it comes to like progress and growth, I think that can be in little areas or little steps as well. Like if a client chooses to, engage in doing their homework or practicing an intervention, that's still growth and progress. Like even if there is some regression, like I work with children 0 to 6. So typically if I have a child who has a lot more behavioral dysregulation than my other kids, if we can get one session where they don't need as much redirection, or they can sit in their chair and engage in an activity for X amount of time and can use appropriate, just appropriate body language and being able to interact and engage appropriately, I find that success and growth. It may not happen all the time, but it's still for me a way to be like, okay, the intervention is working. I just have to be consistent with it, or I can, adjust as needed.
I do have a specific client. When I first started taking clients, I started with this person as a couple, and then her partner did not want to engage in therapy at all, and she just asked, "Can I see you individual? Because I'm gonna need it, whether he want to be there or not." And I literally worked with her for probably 9 months, maybe, and I definitely saw one of the main ways I assess for growth is when people start to gain self awareness, when they can tell me, "Yo, I had this situation occur this week, and I saw it. Like I saw in myself what we've been working on." That's how I know. I'm like, "Oh, you starting to see it in yourself." Because often we cannot look in a mirror and see things in ourselves until we become more self aware.
That's the best when it happens and they have that insight. You're like, "Oh, I caught myself."
Caught it. Yep.
You are working.
Well, I've had several situations. So I work mainly with kids when I do therapy. I have a couple of adults now, but mainly with kids. I do have a current client. I actually saw her in person for the first time in months today, and it was freaking awesome. I've been working with her for about 2 or 3 years now, and she has made significant progress over time. But we've had some of the 10 steps forward, 5 steps back situations, right? And I think one of the things that really helped with like her learning how to regulate her emotions and reduce her anxiety, there is something, it's called the zones of regulation. I don't know if any of y'all have ever heard of that. It was initially created as like a school curriculum. Well, the way that the book is written, it looks like it was a school curriculum, something for teachers to use, but I kind of adapted it to therapy, and it is an amazing resource. It can be used by parents, by therapists, by teachers. It provides so many different skills and strategies for kids. I used it with her to the T. Like I started from the beginning of the book and went through, and she was actually one of the first clients that I tried it on, went through it, all the different zones of emotions, all the different techniques, building up her toolbox, helping her learn all these different strategies. And it took about a year to start seeing progress. What I've noticed is with kids, you kind of like plant the seeds, and then maybe 3 or 4 months later, you'll start to see them like restraining themselves or like catching themselves like, "Oh, wait, no, I don't need to do that." And she's done that a couple of times in session. So I'm extremely proud of her. And she's a really good example of that. So the zones of regulation, parents, if you guys have kids who have like significant behavioral outbursts and you need more than just breathing or fidgets or sensory, if you need more technique, that's a really good one. There is another question here. There's a couple. So let me. Here's another one.
How do you determine your approach to patients? For example, Do you have some clients where you need to be more direct versus a soft approach? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
100% yes.
100%.
So I determine my approach. I immediately don't come out with my approach. The first session is very informative. That's the one where I'm doing the actual intake. Like, let's see why you here. Let's get who your doctor is. Let's see what's going on. Basically, let me make a diagnosis real quick based on your symptoms. The second session, I always put what is it? Rapport based session. So let's build rapport. Let me see how you handle things. Let me see how you work through things. Tell me a little bit about your story. And then based on the temperament, I figure out, like, I'm like playing double dutch to figure out how I can kind of go in there and kind of bring myself to the session. And I always tell people, like, I'm not the kind of therapist that's going to say, tell me what you think about that. I'm going to be for real. If you do not like direct communication, I'm not the one, because I have a very hard time not being direct and saying exactly what it is each and every single time. I will never hurt your feelings. I don't get complaints about that, but I'm not going to allow you to be delusional, not for too long. And and then if I find out that somebody is a little bit more sensitive than other people, and that's okay, I use a lot of Socratic dialogue. So instead of being like, it sounds like he trash, I'll be like, how do you like to be loved? And then they might say, I like A, B, C, D, E, and F, G. And I'll be like, okay, so well, how is he loving you? Or is what he's doing matching up with the way you want to be loved? And that brings awareness to the table instead of just going out there like a bull in the china cabinet.
Yep.
Yep.
I tend to I cater treatment and the modalities I use to the client. I do not cater my style to the client. I'm direct. So I'm not about to cater my own style and way of being to every client, but I will use what seemingly will work best with each client. Like some clients, some modalities aren't gonna work with, so you got to switch it up. You got to use different things. But as far as I'm always direct, I don't even know how to have a soft approach. It's just different ways to say things and ask things in a direct way. So if you, like I just should have said, if you don't like direct communication, you probably won't work well with me, because I'm not about to hold my tongue or not tell you something, or get you to see something or think of something in a different way. But I will cater the things I use to the tools. The tools get catered. I don't cater.
Can I make a distinction between being direct and bringing in your bias? A lot of people will confuse that. You can be direct, but yet be neutral in the situation. That does not mean direct and bringing in our own stuff, which is why we have consultation, which is why we talk to each other about our bias and stuff. So direct does not mean I'm going to shit on you and bring in what my personal beliefs are. Just so y'all know.
Yeah.
And
That's
I'm
perfect.
right with Ashley on that. I have a specific approach to how I do therapy. I'm good at that approach. I'm direct. I pull from family systems and CBT. That's how I think about the world. That's how I think about people. And so that is how I work. I have had clients who tell me, like, yeah, I'm okay with the direct approach. That's cool. Tell me how it is. And then I start to notice how they respond to that. My goal is never to beat you down and, like, point out things about yourself that you're not ready to hear. So if I start to realize that someone's not responding appropriately to or let me say, if my approach is not effective, then I will refer them out to another therapist who maybe takes a different approach that would be more helpful.
I did that today, Amber. I did
Yeah,
that today.
it's hard.
Um,
It's hard to do that, but
it went hard for me.
it's best
So,
sometimes. Well, it is when I've developed a relationship with the client,
well,
because
there's
they
a
don't
there's
want to start over.
there's a such thing as countertransference, to where you might be working with a client and they just might not be for you, because everybody is not fit for everybody else. So I did refer somebody out today, but a while ago, maybe about a year or two ago, I had a child, and they were just not, things were just not where they was running the whole household, parents, everything. And so, you work with parents and you say, okay, I'm not, you don't have to spank them. You can be direct, and you can tell them what to do. And then they'll do it for 2 days. And then they bring that child back to you the next 2 weeks. and they haven't made any progress. And then you do it again and you say it again, and then they bring them back and then they haven't made any progress. And it looks like the child is getting worse when all the time they don't agree with your interventions. They can't deal with the response burst. So I always teach, if you are changing behavior, if you have a dog at the door and you teach that dog to knock on the door every time that dog wants to eat, the dog's going to do that. The minute you say, stop knocking, now I want you to ring the doorbell, what is the dog gonna do? The dog gonna keep on coming to the door knocking because it's like, no, this is how I've been doing what I've been doing. This is how I've been getting what I wanted to get. Eventually, the dog will learn the new trick to be like, okay, what she say do? Hold on, let me think. Let me think how I get what I want. Let me ring the doorbell. So so I was teaching the response burst, like where they keep on knocking, like, God damn it, I said open the door and do it the way I wanted to do it. So I teach that to parents, but some parents can't handle that response burst where the kid is just, they spiraling. It makes the therapy ineffective if you actually can't work with the therapist. So I had to be like, you know what? This ain't it. But I do have somebody who is better at me than this. And I am humble enough to say, y'all can go down the hall.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. I have attachment issues then, because when I develop a therapeutic relationship with this kid, I'm going to do everything I can to make it work. And then when it doesn't, they're like, we don't want to start over. We got to do this with another person. I'm like, I'm sorry, but you got to go. And then
Right.
I have a problem with it. But yeah, we do have a follow-up question.
Wait, Amber, before you ask that, because we can't see the IG questions, and this is a real quick one. Venetia said, this is simple to answer. When meeting with the client for the first time, do y'all prefer virtual or in person? Is there a difference? Is there much of a difference?
It's definitely not a simple answer.
Well, can we answer Christina's first, because it's directly related to approach, and then go to Venetia? But sorry, Venetia. I'm sorry, girl. I butchered your name just now.
It's Venetia. It really ain't that hard. It's crazy.
I don't know why I said it like that, because the way it's spelled in my head is Venetia. But anyways, Christina, her follow-up was just as far as being direct in your approach. What's an example of being direct without being or coming off as harsh or offensive?
For me, I think the good pivot could be, I notice when you do this. I can see that you feel this way, or you've maybe even bringing up past sessions. I notice when we have this conversation around this certain topic, you present yourself this way. You get very heightened in emotion. So instead of being very like direct and hard, instead of being harsh, I go off of observations, kind of what Shug is talking about, or Auntie Amber, not Auntie Amber, I think Auntie Ashley said it, where insight, where that giving that person some insight based off of what I've observed them to be doing and saying. So that way they can think about their actions versus me being like, oh girl, you shouldn't have done that. Or no, I don't need to do that. We can just make the connections based off of observations and use Socratic questioning like Shug has done, which has always been a pivot for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I take notes and I use things that you have said to me, things that you have reported to me. I'm not pulling from my own bias and making assumptions. That way you can't come back and be like, oh, you judging me. No, you said these words in a session. And so that's how that's what I mean when I say I'm direct. I'm going to say it. I'm not going to like hold it back.
I do that often. A client will say, even within the same session, they'll say something at the beginning of the session, and then we start talking about something else. And I'm like, well, about 10 minutes ago when we started the session, this is what you said. And they like, this is exactly what you said. I'm going to call it out so that they can see it. That insight is super important.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we can do Venetia's question now. What was it again?
When meeting with the client for the first time, do y'all prefer virtual or in person? Is there much of a difference?
I'm virtual, so I meet virtually. Doesn't matter. I gotta meet virtually.
It don't matter to me. It's not much of a difference for me either. And I've done both.
I don't think there's a difference because the first session is typically informational.
I think it depends on age for me.
Oh, yeah, there.
Yeah, age, yes.
I don't have a problem. Kids
in person.
The ages of like 6 and 10, I prefer in person for the first couple of sessions. I need to build that rapport because I like to play games and like talk through things while we're playing games. And then we can kind of shift to virtual if it's something that we can do at that point.
I don't even like to do virtual with kids because a lot of kids I see have ADHD and they're all over the place instead of actually gaining from therapy. I think that I just prefer in person. I do virtual, but with some of the people that I see, I think in person has worked a lot better. And I've heard from them like I don't want to do they have a hard time when it's time to do telehealth because the people that I see actually want to come in person. But I'll do some telehealth too.
Telehealth. But I'm a little biased because I started with telehealth. COVID is when I started, so that just informed how I operate. So I love telehealth. I do get people that are like, I would prefer in person, and that's when I say, well, I'm telehealth only, so let's get you hooked up with somebody who you can see in person because some people do need that. But
Yeah.
I like virtual. And you know what? Aside from kids, and this is gonna sound very stereotypical, all my elders out there, I ain't trying to be mean, but some old folks, they need in person too, because that's a technological barrier. It's like how I get on this snap face telehealth, I don't know what I'm doing. You know what? You know what? You might need to see somebody in person. You just might.
Well, I do in person for all of my psychological evaluations. I have heard that some people do them virtually, but I do prefer those in person. And then for therapy, it's kind of mixed for me. So, but for that initial session for kids, I'm straight up in person. I don't offer virtual for that. Okay, next question. Social cues, social skills. If someone struggles with picking up on social cues or reading the room, how can they improve those skills?
Well, there's something called social skills training. I know I do it for children who are, sometimes they're not fully diagnosed with autism, but they have the neurodevelopmental disorder, like not otherwise specified. And so there's some oddities, social differences. So there's social skills training that, I do with children 0 to 6, which I'm not saying it can be done for adults, but at least for kids, we have a whole thing to do.
I use social skills training with adults, so it can absolutely be used with. There are adults who are still dealing with the social anxiety that they never handled as kids, or their parents never recognized, or they were just coined, oh, they're just shy, or they're just this, when really they couldn't read a room or understand certain social cues. So they still need to learn that stuff as an adult.
I don't allow parents to come in saying she's shy because that's reinforcement of the behavior. So if we are here to teach social cues, that's one of the things I deconstruct immediately is if we want to start giving this child social skills and stuff like that, giving her a disclaimer of she's shy and can't speak to people is reinforcing that she's shy and can't speak to people. And a lot of times the voices that we hear in our head are our parents, and you might get that kid in another room and all of a sudden they chatty Cathy.
I also think it depends on the diagnosis too.
Yeah.
The way that you treat someone or the way that you teach social skills for someone with social anxiety is going to be much different than for someone with autism. Autism, it would be more of like repetitive training, like ABA type of therapy. Social anxiety, it's more of the insight, helping them recognize what their triggers are for the anxiety, because that's impacting their ability to be aware in the social situation. So that's also another piece to it, depending on what the diagnosis is.
Yep, and including selective mutism as well. That's another diagnosis where kids can go completely silent, and they only talk around individuals that they feel safe with. So yeah.
So when I was I did my internship, I started off with my practicum under school psychologist, and I seen 4 kids with selective mutism, and it was fascinating.
I know. First time
I was very
like, what?
Yeah, but I did learn from my mentor that whole she shy thing. Like, let's just let it be what it is, and then let them decide how they're gonna be, and then like we kind of just work through it. So I seen a kid go from won't say nothing at all to whispering, and then to talking in a really really low voice. And then when I left, she was still talking in a low voice. But I was fascinated. I was like, I ain't never seen nothing like that in my life.
That's
No,
awesome.
selective mutism blew me away because I didn't think. I was like, "What the hell?
Yeah.
What the hell?" Until I seen it, I was like, "Oh, okay. It really
It's
is
a
a
thing.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing."
And the thing about Karen was she didn't play either. Like she was very warm. The kids felt really good with her. Like she didn't call her group like a mental health group. She called it kids club. So the kids would leave their classrooms and they would come to kids club. And kids club was fun. Like we would get to play games with them and stuff like that. And then it was a social skills training group. And so the whole some of that stuff didn't fly in there. Even with the kids with autism, there wasn't no he's shy or he has autism disclaimer. It was like she taught him how to live in the room with other people, and he was like really interacting with the other kids, like straight up like straight up a neurotypical kid, but you knew that he had those deficits. So it was I was fascinated. I learned a whole lot about I was like, whoa.
And that's why I always tell parents, like, because I know when I diagnose kids with ADHD and with autism, parents are always so worried. Like, will my kid ever be able to function? Like, are they always going to have these difficulties? And I always stress to them that skills training, it's skills. There is a deficit in certain skills that they were born with, that deficit, but you teach them those skills, build it up, make it become a habit for them. And once they have a habit of using those skills, they can function in different settings. It's just learning the skills to begin with, and that's very difficult to teach if you don't know what you're doing. That's why you need professional help for those things.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. I love hearing those success stories.
What's next?
All right, let's see what's next. We have Jessica. How do you deal with clients that are religious trauma survivors? And how does that factor in your treatment approaches and strategies? All right, Ash and Keish, go ahead, hit it. No, I'm just kidding.
Child.
He's like, what?
And I think Ash, that's all. No, but yeah.
So there are several different ways to deal with clients who come in with religious trauma. The first thing you got to understand is the top symptoms of religious trauma. You're dealing with somebody who's coming in with self-hatred, shame, perfectionism, and hypervigilance. Those are like the top 4 things you're going to see in that person. And so when you're dealing with that, this one takes a gentle approach. This is less of, like, I'm still going to be direct, but I have to also be very gentle. And a lot of times I use somatic work with those clients because I need to get you to feel what's in your body. You have literally been trained to not feel it, to ignore it, to think that certain things are not okay to feel. So I'm trying to get you to tap into that. Also, CBT tends to work well with this because we're talking about things that have been embedded in your thought process your whole life. And now you have this trauma that came along with that, but you still believe, like a lot of times people with religious trauma, they're not trying to let go of their faith. For them, that's not what it is. It's I'm trying to untangle and unpack this trauma. So you have to be really gentle with clients like that. So I like to use softer modalities like your DBT, mindfulness, those type of approach, somatic work, things that'll get you inside of your emotions and out of your thoughts.
I think you have to be very, like you said, soft approach. Be very careful when you approach this, because not only are you dealing with trauma, but also the framework, the spiritual framework that you have to approach this with, and you just have to be careful not to bring your own stuff into it. I would say these type of clients, or these clients with these type of background, I would have definitely a consultation with maybe a Christian counselor, or even somebody just, that would have a different, like, neutral approach if I have an opposing type of view or type of religion or spirituality. So you just have to be careful with this specific group.
And I'm gonna
I
tell
let
you,
people be the authors of their own life. So the thing about religion is it started from very small, from the first time you can remember. And so I validate. I validate your experience. Um, I let you tell me what's happening. I let you tell me what you dealt with. Um, I'm only time I give pushback is when you are mad at yourself, or you know what I mean, you've been treated badly for like what you believe and stuff like that. But I really that it takes a lot of validation because people have already been invalidated in their thoughts and in their feelings, and then psychoeducation.
and Auntie Keish, I would just say with the us as the professional working with the person and us consulting with other people, other professionals, if we are gonna consult with another, like a Christian counselor, for example, or any faith, like because it's not just Christianity. I want to make that
Right.
clear. People have religious trauma and other faith backgrounds.
Oh Lord. Yes.
But no matter who you tie in with, if you're gonna tie in with somebody spiritual, you got to be careful there too, because a lot of times people with that background carry their bias right into the room. They can't
Right.
help it. It's almost like they can't help it. So you got to be very careful with that. And I'm being truthful. My bachelor's is in Christian counseling, and even the coursework, I can look back and now say that was tilted to make me think a certain way. And now I have to kind of unravel it in order to be able to help people who deal with it, especially people who deal with it from other religious backgrounds. So you just got to be real gentle, and you got to be real careful with how you approach clients who are specifically dealing with religious trauma.
Yeah. I like Sugar's approach, validate, because there's probably been a lot of invalidation. So having that approach is key, very critical.
And they'll always blame themselves. That's the thing. I said self-hatred is one of the top symptoms. Like they have learned to point the finger at themselves. Like, this is me. My faith isn't strong enough. So now you're dealing with somebody that not only needs to unpack that trauma, but they also have to start to reframe how they see themselves.
Yeah.
All right. How do you? I lost it. Something. Wait, there's something. Oh, how do you deal with the child that has oppositional defiant disorder? Let's say children and teens. I think.
Me.
Go for it, boo. Go for it.
So first and foremost, I just did a keynote speaking event today where we talked about children are often diagnosed with ODD, conduct disorder, and all these other disorders, behavioral disorders, and we're not really asking the questions of like how many adverse child experiences has this child had.
Yeah.
And sometimes we are very quick to label a child, and I'm not saying you, but I'm saying professionals, medical professionals, even us as mental health professionals, without doing the due diligence of looking around in the environment as to what has caused this child to act like this. And I'm not saying that there may be that small percent of children that literally will just be argumentative and be vindictive and things of that nature, but it is important to do your due diligence by asking other questions. What happened to this child? What type of environment is this child in? What does this child see being modeled in front of them? Is there different parenting practices? We also got to consider cultural competency. Sometimes culturally, there are certain parents that teach their child to have a voice in their home, but maybe with the teacher and with other people, that's not allowed. So you have to consider those differences. And then to add that, one other question that I thought was so good in my consultation was that what are the skills is a child using in one environment that they necessarily may not need to use in another environment? And I thought that was really, really framed very good, because sometimes we see kids surviving in the school environment because they're being bullied, but at home, they don't need those skills. So parents don't see that behavior, or vice versa. So I just think it's important when we see oppositional defiant to ask the questions like that's around the child, what's happening around the child for these behaviors to happen.
Child, that is my man Bronfen Brenner. Okay.
Yeah.
Bronfen Brenner. He tried to tell us it ain't just the individual.
It ain't just the kid.
It's the people around you. It's the systems working with each other. It's all of that. So what Auntie Keisha's saying, y'all, that's my man, Bronfen Brenner. Go look him
Yuri
up.
Bronfen Brenner.
His name is Yuri.
Stop saying that man's name.
He was on to something back then. He was on to something. I'm just saying.
What I'm gonna say is, as parents, it's easy to look around at the systems on the outside, but sometimes what are we modeling? And I think the hard thing for parents is to take a good hard look in the mirror and be like, if every time you say something to me, I'm popping you in your mouth, or I'm whooping you and this and the third. And I never ever demonize for spanking. And y'all gonna see me say this in a million different episodes. But at the same time, what are we modeling? Are we modeling emotional dysregulation? And then the child is just emotionally dysregulated and not necessarily oppositional defiant. My kids were, I was told a few weeks ago, your kids have a voice, and I understand you giving them a voice, but sometimes, I'll be wanting to jack slap them because they say too much. Well, we ain't doing that because guess what? They have a voice for a reason, and they're their own voice of reason. So sometimes what looks oppositional is not oppositional. It's actually been parent led. So I like, for example, Izzy will say, well, you hurt my feelings and you don't do the things that you're supposed to do. So it's hard for me to do the things I'm supposed to do. And another parent will look at that like that child is disrespectful. I'm about to pop her in her mouth. And for me, I'm like, first of all, let me tone you down. I will tone it down. But at the same time, I will be like, okay, what is she really saying to me? What point is she trying to get across to me? And then I'll decide if it needs to be toned down or not.
Ooh,
Yeah.
listen.
I agree
One
with
thing
all
a
of
teen
that.
told me before, she was like, how do you expect for us to have a voice when you tell us to shut up all the time? A teen told me that in therapy, and I was like, you know what?
But that
Right.
does when I think of ODD, I think of a loss of control, and I think of a kid who is trying to regain control of their life. Not
Yep.
all kids. Some of it is like genetic, like innate, like
Mm-hmm.
ain't no amount of giving them control that's going to get rid of those behaviors. But for most kids, it's a loss of control and trying to gain that back. You constantly have people telling you what to do, making choices for you. So I know we're talking a lot about like figuring out what the why is. I know ODD is also misdiagnosed really frequently. And there are a lot of diagnoses that have like overlapping symptoms with it. So my first recommendation is to get the kid reevaluated to make sure that ODD is a proper diagnosis. But also in the meantime, figuring out ways to provide this child with more control over their life. I'm not telling you to let them run rampant and do whatever they want. That's not what I'm saying.
Because I'm going to whoop his ass.
But giving choices. So when a kid says, "Can I have some candy?" right? And the parent automatically says no. And then they ask for something else and the parent says no. And then they ask for something else. And that's like their constant is that they're always being told no. They're going to start saying no back to you because
Right.
no, why you keep telling me no for everything? So
Right.
can I have some candy? Not right now, but you could have an orange or you could have this sweet fruit or whatever it is, but giving them options. So if I'm not going to give you candy, you can pick from these 3 different things which one you want. And
I
that
just
gives them a little bit of control. For
I just
some
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
some kids that will help with some of those oppositional behaviors. And if it's consistent at home and at school, so if you and the teacher or the school work together and realize, okay, we're giving him choices for certain things, that's helpful, or her. But some kids, like I said, it won't work, it won't matter. That's
I have kids like that who box each other. The moment they get in session with each other, the moment something happens and they don't like, they immediately start hitting, swinging, and everything. So I have to set up a structure and regulate myself before I try to intervene with them. And yes, their behaviors may be off the wall, but I also have to figure out ways to pivot. You can pivot.
Or whoop their
And
ass.
listen,
right.
Sean,
Next question. Let's see.
So while she get the question,
yeah, I
I
was gonna
will
say, what's
say
the question?
that my daughter, she was ADHD when she was very young, and it looked like ODD because everything was just over the top. We every day was rough. I almost didn't like her at a certain point in time because of the way it was, and so I did have to start saying, um, you got to go to bed. Well, I don't want to go to bed. You can go to bed now, or you can go to bed in 10 minutes. And they thought like this, just the thought of having control, like that, just reminded me of what you were talking about, Amber. But go ahead.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the self-awareness and mirror thing. When my kids are oppositional, I have to consider how oppositional am I, even as an adult. I'm oppositional in a lot of ways to a lot of things, and your kids pick that up from you. Like Auntie Shook said, you got to be ready for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. We have a couple more questions. So this one is from Abe. Besides standardized psychological tests, oh, you speak in my language. What you about to ask? How confident are you that those results can actually lead to a clinical diagnosis such as ADHD? Besides standard, so you're saying outside of standardized testing? I don't understand.
Or is he saying like how confident are you that the results are accurate? Maybe he asking how accurate are these results? Can they show one thing but that still not be right? That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
He said yes.
Okay. So if he's talking about standardized testing, I mean, pretty accurate, but it depends on the person. So I always tell my clients that I am not doing brain scans. I'm not a medical doctor. So we're not doing like a CT scan or MRI. So I cannot say 100% that this is your diagnosis, but we can get very close with standardized testing. You also have to consider ethnicity when you're doing testing. You have to consider the testing environment that you're in, whether there are not a lot of distractions or whether you're sitting right by a window with the daggone police siren running by. Like, you have to consider all of those things whenever you are considering a diagnosis. So there are some times where I go against the numbers, the test results, because I realize that there are a lot of other factors that are impacting like the diagnosis or what they present as. I don't know if that answers the question. I think it really depends on
I don't think it does.
the person and the situation. There's no straight answer for that.
I think what he's asking is, oh, okay. It didn't answer it for me. I thought he was asking like, never mind. This might be my stuff.
Like,
No, I'm
And
use
we
some
mentioned, and
self-experience.
just so you know, Abe, we mentioned that in the report. Like, we'll say because of this, and this, so and so's cognitive functioning may not be an accurate picture of their. We mentioned that in the report, and we'll say all that in the behavioral observations. What we supposed to.
Yeah. And I also do think, like if we're talking specifically like ADHD when it comes to standardized testing, there are some things that you just can't, like you can fake bad at some things, but you can't fake good. So there are particular scores that we're looking at for ADHD. There are certain scores that have been associated with people who have been medically diagnosed with ADHD, like brain scans. That's where the research comes from. And so whenever someone performs poorly on something, when they have like literally tried their best, then that's when we can say like, yeah, it's pretty certain, like 98% certain that this person has ADHD or whatever diagnosis it is. And on the questionnaires that you do too, you'll never see 100%. It'll be like 98%, 99%, but it'll never say 100% certain.
He said I don't trust the testing, it's biased. So go ahead, Amber.
Why don't you trust the testing? What is biased about it?
Does testing have its
biased? Yeah.
Yes, it does. We're not going to lie and say the history doesn't factor in as to how standardized testing was made and all the things that go a part of it. Absolutely. That's something we don't deny. And I think that all psychologists, if in their history classes, psychology 101, they will discuss that with you. So yes, there is some biases in there. However, that is currently our form of testing when we want to get diagnosis for people for now. Not saying that it can't change or there's not this overhaul of psychology coming, but for now, that's what we use.
So yes, I'll say this.
This is true.
Standardized testing.
Yes.
No, I was going to say standardized testing. So when you say testing, I'm thinking the full evaluation, but you're talking just about the test. The standardized test, the research that is based on, yes, it is mostly white people that they do the research on. Very small minority groups are thrown into the research. But remember, for a psychological evaluation, the whole process, we are not depending solely on those scores. If that's what we were doing, a computer could do it. You could AI generate a report with the diagnosis if you're only using the testing scores. Remember that we consider the clinical background information. I consider ethnicity, gender. I consider any type of trauma, any other type of situational factors. I consider all of those things whenever I provide a diagnosis. So that's why I say sometimes the test scores come out as one thing, but if I'm looking at all the other scores, I'm like, I don't think that's valid. I'm actually going to go with this because this fits a little bit better. So
and
we don't
that's what
rely
separates us.
on numbers from
And
those.
that's what separates us from other professions, because psychologists are supposed to have that clinical expertise in doing those things. If you see numbers on a test, nine times out of 10, people can't explain those numbers except the psychologist, because that's what we're trained to do, to consider that all background and those test numbers. That's why it's a comprehensive or integrative report.
I wanted to add to that too. 2 + 2 is 4 in every single race, right? So the numbers are going to be numbers, even though there are going to be some biases like in the testing. A lot of times they're kind of working to fix that, but you're also looking at the actual psychologists. Are they culturally competent? A lot of times I get people who want me to test their kid because I am Black, if they're a Black kid, and because I'm going to look at the demographic, because I'm going to I'm going to talk about everything that might be impacting this child. Some kids don't have ADHD. Some kids look like they have ADHD because they have so much anxiety and depression. So I think that people think that we just look at this test information and say, oh, the white man said they got ADHD, they got ADHD. And that's not how it works.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
Nope.
Yeah, it's a lot goes into it. A lot goes into it. This is why when people do go get their child tested, it's not just a matter of the standardized psychological test. They send stuff home to the parents to fill out.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers have to fill out things. People in that child's life have to give observational reports for that reason. Because if the observational reports don't match these numbers, now we got to do a little bit more got to be done. So it's not just, Abe, I totally agree with you that testing is steeped in bias, and we know that. But there's more to testing than just that basic psychological test that you're talking about.
Yep.
All right, next question. Elijah had a question. This one could be probably quick. How often do you end up referring a client out?
Depends.
My husband's still home, y'all. Just to let y'all.
Hi, Elijah.
Hi.
You got your girl over here cheesing from ear to ear.
I haven't had to refer clients out very often.
Me neither.
It's a case by case basis, but it hasn't been very often.
You know, I find that I refer them out more in the initial, like I do an initial consultation visit, like a 15-minute free consultation. I can pretty much figure out right in that if I'm going to be able to provide the service, or if I need to tell them, okay, I'm going to give you this list of people, because what you're presenting that you need help with is either beyond my scope, or I know I'm not going to be able to do it for whatever reason. So the most I've ever referred is right after the initial consultation. We never even had a first session.
I'm just like floored that you did a free 15-minute consultation.
I do. Here's my thing. I don't have time, my time to waste, or somebody that really does need help, setting them up for an intake just to find out at the intake, this is out of my scope or whatever. So I offer, when people hit me up on Psychology Today or something, I'm like, I'll email them back. I'll set you up for a free 15-minute consultation so we can meet virtually and see if this is even a fit. Possibly a fit.
I'm going to put that in my toolbox. I did not know about that. Mm-hmm. But I work at a place where they be like, you're going to do the intake, and if this ain't going to work, then that's still my time. But I have referred people out if I was like, this ain't going to be me. But a lot of times in the places that I work, there's people, what I can't do, somebody else can. So, like I said, I referred somebody else out today because I was just like, this is not working. I think that me and you have hit a therapeutic wall, but I think down the hall, that wall you might be able to hop that fence. So I'll do it. It hasn't been often, but I will do it as needed.
And you know something else that specifically gets referred out to? I'm gonna say it because I work with couples. With couples, if I sense or even know that abuse is present or like anger management is needed, I will refer or tell that person this has to be done first. Before we can get to couples work, this individual needs this. Like ethically, you shouldn't even be working with a couple if one of the partners or even both has any type of abuse going on or whether physical violence, drug abuse, whatever. They need to attack that first. That is primary.
All right, next question. is if a sorry, if a friend or family member is a psychologist or counselor, should they feel obligated to me if I'm struggling and we have a connection? So, in other words, we are psychologists and counselors. Do we feel obligated to our family members who we are close to if they are struggling?
Nope. Nope.
I feel obligated, but I had to that was a tangle web for me to where I wanted to help everybody for a long time. And I was just like, I gotta help. I want to help everybody. What do you need? What do you need? And then it started to get exhausting because I was going to work helping people and I was coming home helping people. And then when I'm on the phone with you, you think I'm your counselor. So I have since was like, that's my boundary. Go find you a therapist. And I'm loving doing it.
And I think that we've talked about this before on here where, setting up a plan, if there's some, you have to know your limits. And if you cannot, follow through or work with this person or whatever, you have your limits, then, setting up a plan, having them contact other people or having them, like Shook said, go and find your own therapist. So, yeah.
It's not my job to manage your emotions.
Whatever our relationship was before I went to school and got the letters behind my name, that's what our relationship needs to remain. Don't expect more of me now because of this title, because this title isn't for you. I have to be able to put this down sometimes. And I need to be able to put this down with the people that's supposed to love me. So if you're my friend, for all the friends and family members of mental health professionals out there, understand that with you, they just want to be them. They don't want to be in work mode. Like if you talk to me before and we vented to each other, it will become imbalanced if now I'm only helping you. Because now I don't know when I can come to you when I'm struggling. Because now I'm helping you.
Can I ask this question? Would this be a question for a woman? Would you ask the same question to a man that's a therapist, that's in your friend group, or not your spouse, but at least in your friend group? Would you ask the same labor to happen? And the reason why I'm asking that is sometimes where women, society is conditioned that women have to be nurturers in every single aspect of their life and give up every single thing in their life just to cater to, protect, give to other people. So I'm wondering, is this the same energy if your male friend was a therapist?
Abe said he would.
Absolutely.
I don't feel obligated to do it, but I will at some point. Like I'll ask my friend, okay, is this a therapist hat or is this the friend hat? Like which one you need right now? I will every now and then. It's not every single situation, every time a friend is struggling, but there are particular friends where I'm like, yeah, let me go ahead and I went to school all these years. I can use it for y'all too, And then also I have realized that when I be drinking with my family members, that's when they want to throw it all on me, and my globe is all messed up, so I can't stop myself. So I be all in it, like, oh, tell me, yeah, let me give you some strategies and some techniques when I'm drunk. That's the only time when I feel like I can't stop because my brain is telling me like, do it. But
I'm mad you be giving out drunk advice.
I'm drunk. When I'm
drunk, to be totally honest, to answer Abe's question ethically, we're not supposed to be ethically. I mean, whether it's male or female, technically, we are supposed to be doing that ethically. No. We cannot do that. You shouldn't even put us in that situation.
Right. If I have the capacity, I will intermingle it. But if I don't have the capacity, boundaries. I have learned now. Oh, I don't have the capacity to handle it.
Technically,
I'm not intermingling it no more. Because you know what people been doing is they want to talk to you about all their stuff, but whenever you start talking, they gotta go. And that's that shit I don't like. It's because I'll be having shit too. Now you gotta go. Like all of a sudden you gotta go to work, or somebody on your other line. But then they be like, and I feel used. Yes. So yeah, I don't really like the feeling, and I think it's a nasty feeling for a therapist to have to go in with their family, and then all of a sudden they got to be the therapist, and then you don't listen. Because that's another thing too. I started getting frustrated. I'll cuss somebody out because it's like, yeah, if somebody is coming to my office, they're coming because they want help. But then you don't believe in shrinks for real. You don't believe in the therapy for real. you think it's stupid for real, but then you asking the therapist for questions because you want some free therapy for real. And then the next thing you know, you're not listening. You got your own dumb thoughts anyway. So go ahead and listen to yourself, talk to yourself, and I'm gonna go talk to my therapist. So I tell people I have a therapist. You go get a therapist. I'm not at work, and if I can't bounce some ideas off of you, you're gonna stop talking to me.
So I'll
Yeah.
tell
And
people
And
what
I
I
do
do.
want to clarify that the drunken advice is just advice. There's no clinical connections, childhood, none of that is coming into it. I like Auntie Q said, it's unethical for you to professionally see a family member or a friend. So I do not do that like in my professional.
And
But
then
I
our
do.
therapist that we
Got
can't give advice anyway. Therapists, for the 100th time, do not give clients advice. That is not our job. Because the second they take our advice and some shit go left, now we might be in trouble. We cannot give advice.
Yeah.
So if I'm giving
And
you
you don't
advice,
know people. You don't know if people is like to the point of suicide, like suicidal. You don't know none of that. Like we would have to like do a patient history. Like we cannot just be out here giving advice. We shouldn't be anyway, but you shouldn't be putting yourself in that situation where you could possibly intermingle something that shouldn't be happening. Like we have ethics for a reason.
Yeah.
Shane, oh my goodness, I love that Shane's on here. Shane is that's my homeboy. He's so funny. I'm one drink away from asking for advice.
Not one step away from asking for advice. I mean, I think that there is a difference between literally having that conversation with your homeboy or your homegirl and y'all just, shooting the shit. That's different from you literally asking me like, okay, from a therapist perspective, then we on some other shit. But if you just shooting the shit and we catching up and you just going through something and you need an ear like to hear you out and you just need to vent, that's different. That's different.
But if I can't shoot my shit back, then it's a one-sided relationship.
Yes.
Okay.
And sidebar, y'all, we gave y'all the resource for asking us. Y'all don't listen. Ask the Auntie was literally for this very thing. This is where you get a mixture of advice, professional touch from the Aunties, because we can't give y'all therapy in this setting on this platform. It's unethical. But we can tell y'all our thoughts.
So are you differentiating between advice and counseling? Yes, we absolutely are. Completely different thing. Counseling, there's a lot more. Yeah, it's completely different.
Interventions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're using evidence-based. Yeah, that's what
goal setting.
Counseling is a form of advice. Let me just say that. It is a form of advice because you're directly planting little seeds, but to tell somebody what to do is what we don't do ever.
Right.
You should do.
When I think of advice, I'm thinking of you telling someone like, well, I think you should da 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 da. Like, situation, this is what I would do. But we don't do that in counseling. I don't tell a client, you should do this, you need to do this. It's more of like, what do you think about this? Like, based on what you told me about your history, like, it seems like this is a pattern for you. How do we change that pattern and kind of like have them come up with those things themselves? And then also using evidence-based techniques and interventions as well. But when I give advice, I'd be the one, especially if I've been drinking, I'd be the one to be like, yeah, you should do that. That sounds just about like something I would do.
And when I give advice, I'd be like, don't let that nigga play in your face more than once.
Oh, girl.
Listen.
Don't get me started. But that's you.
That's honestly, with clients, a lot of times, because clients will still ask. I'm gonna tell y'all, clients will still ask, what you think I should do? Or they'll explain the situation and be like, so what do you think? Half the time they already know what they should do.
Stop playing with me up in here, girl.
I'm just saying.
Next question.
That'd just be my advice. Now I can't tell my client that, obviously, even if I know he played in her face.
Okay, if someone's struggling with addiction, what tips do you have for them to kick the habit?
They don't kick habits.
I don't work.
They don't kick habits.
Call on me. I worked in addictions for 3 years.
Huh?
I was an addictions counselor for 3 years. So, regular therapists, regular counselors need to refer addiction clients to an addictions counselor.
Yes.
Now, in my practice, they always send them to me because I know what the fuck I'm doing in that category. So, with addiction, it's not only one thing. There are group therapies that you can go to. There is AA. People with addiction don't understand that being an addict, the label is important because it's important to label the habit in order for you to change the habit. That being an addict is a lifestyle. So it's not just I'm an addict and I can smoke and drink for the rest of my life and I can do this harm reduction and everything is going to be cool. But it's actually actively trying to function, not drinking, not smoking, not binge eating, not throwing up. It's a whole lifestyle. And a lot of people are not ready to live that lifestyle. So when it comes to addiction, addiction is hard, especially if it's a food addiction, because you can't stop eating food. You have to learn how to navigate through that situation. Addiction is at its highest when you've been off for a long time and you're actually exposed or you're in high risk situations. You have a very, very strong chance of going back to your addiction when you have a high risk situation. So sometimes actually removing yourself from that high risk situation, changing people, places, and things is the way to change addictions. And then also working with your thought processes. Addiction counselors cannot just go in there and say, tell me about your childhood, because some people's childhood is the reason why they're an addict. So it's actually stabilizing the client first, sending them to AA, getting them actually involved in therapy and living that lifestyle, rewarding them, saying, you know what, you 3 months sober, bet you get this coin. You 6 months sober, I'm gonna do a dinner for you, involving their whole family into the counseling, and then going through and unpacking any kind of trauma little by little. But a lot of times they're with a therapist and they're with an addictions therapist. Yep. Boom. That's my job.
Do you use motivational
What you say?
Motivational interviewing, Shook?
Yes, I have used motivational interviewing. I've had to do the interviews before we got to group therapy. And so I would always do that, let meet people where they are, see which group they belong in. Do they belong in the group that still can't see themselves as an addict? Or do they belong in the group that's like, all right, I'm ready for change? And I've done it on, I did it when I was in Hawaii. I used to go to 3 different islands and do it. So I would see teens with addiction habits, professionals with addiction habits. And I'm talking pilots, nurses, doctors, like professionals, and then blue collar workers. There were 3 different groups.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That addiction has no specific identifiers.
Yep.
It does not.
And just to let you know, when you say kicking their habit or kicking their addiction, a lot of people now, I do not want to go back to be certified in addiction counseling, but I did have to when I worked at another place. The supervisor I had, she was a certified addiction counselor, and she wanted me to do it so bad, and I was like, I don't know, ma'am, back up. But one thing that people don't realize when they talk about kicking a habit or somebody getting clean or that type of thing, relapse is a part of the process. Like people 100%. Look at relapse like, okay, the addiction help or the counseling didn't work, the addiction counselor didn't work. No. Relapse is literally ingrained in the process of recovery. So when you see somebody fall off, they still on the journey.
And can I add one more thing? Because I worked in addictions back when I was at Summit County, and I know this is going to be hard for people to hear, but death is a part of addiction. I don't care what you say. That's a really hard thing for people to understand. And when you work in that population, grief is also a part of that population because you may lose that person.
Yep.
You just may lose that person. And that is just the reality of it.
But families have a hard time with addiction. So there are addiction groups like Al-Anon and Nar-Anon. Those are groups where if you have a family member that is dealing with somebody with addiction, they can actually go to those groups and learn how to handle their addicted loved one, because families take it so hard. The addict is out there living their best life because they're numbing all their pain. They're numbing their pain. They're hanging out with their friends. Like they think, and in their head, they're like, this is where I'm at. But the families suffer because that ain't what you want for your people. So there are groups that they can go to too.
And as family members, honestly, those groups are great. But if you are living your life with an addict, somebody that you love, you definitely need individual therapy too. You've been impacted by their addiction. They're the one addicted, but you have ramifications of that. And you might be an enabler in the situation. You want to learn how to set boundaries and not be an enabler. There are certain things you have to learn how to do when that is your loved one as well. Especially
that's why you need to go to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon.
You need
And addiction isn't just addiction. There's other comorbidities going on. Like there's other disorders happening, depression, anxiety, and even medical conditions that are going on with people who have alcohol use disorder or some sort of substance abuse disorder. There could be medical conditions.
Yep.
And people with ADHD, a lot of times ADHD is associated with addiction sometimes as people get older, because in bipolar disorder, a lot of people they want to quiet that brain. And some people, when you just decide there's no diagnosis, some people go get help another way. And that's what you kind of staving off when you actually take your kids and go get them diagnosed, because we're in a generation now to where we're not in denial. Not all of us. A lot of us are seeing what's wrong and going to go get it fixed with no shame attached to it. So I encourage that for all of this. But we do have to wrap up. We have been on here for at least 20 more minutes than we actually planned to be. So I did want to plug in again. July 13th is our in-person clinical cookout, and we're going to be doing that in Cleveland, Ohio. So get your tickets now. Tickets are only $15. We're going to be putting a link out there. Start getting yourself ready. If you can't pay $15 to come get some free mental health, I don't know. And it's going to be food afterwards. Okay, get your life.
Well, it's not free if it's $15.
Plus the flight, plus the hotel. Let's not shade people.
Yeah, it's not free, but
that's true. Well, $15 mental health.
And y'all support y'all's own mental health. Y'all should come because there is a conference where all of the aunties will be presenting as well. So
yes,
$15 mental health.
Okay. Listen, it's workshops. It's workshops. We got relationship workshops, trauma workshops that help you figure out your kids and reaching and teaching your kids. All psychological testing. All workshops. We got a panel discussion, and because I know how folks are, the cookout itself, you getting food and a bunch of other stuff. Like, come play spades with us. Come play dominoes. Come on.
And see, I was feeling like the $15 was more so paying for the food, but I guess the $15 is paying for the conference. But the food is still going to be free. So
even if you can't attend, you can donate to us.
Christina, for your birthday, girl. Birthday trip.
$15. If you can't attend, we would love any type of contributions that you would help with supporting us, even if you can't be there in person.
We got to put the donation tab on our pages so that if you want to donate, and listen, if it's in your heart to donate more than $15, please do. We're trying to help folks. Help us. Help you.
All right. We out.
All right. So we out. What y'all about to do?